no one is above the law. The people have had enough. We will root out the criminals and expose them all. We're fighting to expose the criminal element in Texas. Our investigation in the Brazoria County's justice system has just begun.
And now your host, Kevin Henry.
Welcome back to the Kevin Henry Podcast. I would like to thank Travis Reed for coming on the show last week and sharing his tragic story. And even though much of it might have been difficult to hear, we want to thank Travis for his bravery. We wish him much success in his advocacy for protecting other victims from sexual predators. We must not rest until each and every last child is protected and safe from these monsters. And before I introduce today's guest, I would like everyone to hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us get our show to the top of the charts and allows everyone to see what we're doing here at the Kevin Henry Podcast. And now I'd like to introduce today's guest, former Michigan GOP Chair, Kristina Karamo. Welcome to the show, Kristina.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I am excited to have you on here. I was actually reading about all your stuff on X and starting to learn about you. I really like the fact that you're very spiritually led and the Holy Spirit guides your heart. And that's what got me into politics. And can you tell us a little bit about your spirituality and what got you into politics?
Yeah. So, one of the things about me, I have a master's in Christian apologetics. I actually went to theology school because my focus was to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, because fundamentally all of our problems in society boil down to separation from God, our spiritual problems. And oftentimes we try to solve social problems and political problems in a carnal manner, and just it begets more problems. But how I got involved in politics was really in college. I got involved in the Republican Party because I'm strongly opposed to abortion. Abortion is murder. We're killing innocent children in the name of our own, sexual liberation. And I always found that to be just such an abominable thing, to murder our own children. So that's what got me involved in the Republican Party in college. But as I went on and more of the conservative positions, I just naturally aligned with because of my Christian faith, and it's just rational, for lack of a better term. I took some time off for personal reasons, just from being active in politics, but I got back involved in 2016, and I got involved in my local GOP party at the congressional district level, and I had a podcast called Right on 14th with our party. Got involved in state committee, got involved in the county party, and just kept increasingly getting involved, because one of my things I'm very strong in believing is if I see a problem, I want to solve it. A lot of people like to whine and complain when they see problems, but they don't want to actually be change agents for Christ and fix those problems. So I decided to get more involved. Fast forward, about 2019, I became one of the spokeswomen for the Oakland County Republican Party, and I would go on this television show we have here in the Detroit area, where it would essentially be a debate between Republicans and Democrats on various issues. Come 2020, still in that role, still on state committee, but I knew about election corruption to some extent is when 2018, we were informed about Jocelyn Benson, who was running for Secretary of State, and how she was part of George Soros' Secretary of State project. Now, George Soros is an operative for the globalists. He's not the only one. He's oftentimes seen as the boogeyman. He's a boogeyman. They have multiple. So he's just one of the many. And so nevertheless, we knew about her background. We knew this was a woman who did not approach elections as someone who wanted to make sure that they were safe and secure. And honest, the outcome, she had an ideological drive for wanting to be Secretary of State, which is dangerous. So nevertheless, come 2020, I was a poll watcher actually in the March primary, and I saw some things that didn't pass the smell test. Fast forward, I'm condensing this because a lot of this stuff is really long.
Michigan, is that where the pizza boxes were going on the windows and stuff? Is that your background?
Correct. And I was in that room. So I'll get to that. So speeding up to your point. So in the August primary, because every state is different regarding how our primaries work. Our presidential primaries are different times, and our regular election primaries are different times. When I say regular, I mean your traditional statewide, elections, or your state house, state senate, and what have you. Those primaries are different times depending on the state, but everyone's general election is still the same time in November. So I was actually at the TCF Center, which you're discussing, where they put the pizza boxes up, and I was in that room. And quite frankly, I was there for over 30 hours, and I wasn't. It wasn't like I walked into the situation saying, I'm ready to be a Superman. I'm going to be there all day. No, I had intentions to staying there I got there about 11 a.m. and I intended on staying to maybe about 9 or 10. But then I began to notice things that just simply didn't add up. They were moving ballots between these various locations within the TCF Center. So they have something called absentee counting boards. Our elections are intentionally overly complicated. They're intentionally overly complicated. That way, the average citizen can't follow along. Our election should be simple. It's basic math: 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It's not this thing, but they engage in the sleight of hand and they move ballots around from table to table. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on. There was suspicious activity with the military ballots. So in Michigan, we're actually everywhere. You have the clerk can either email a soldier a ballot, or the soldier can download the ballot online, and then they would download it online and then they would send it back. So we were seeing military ballots that were not on that military ballot form. Instead, they were coming in as regular ballots. And we're like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that this woman, the clerk, has mailed a ballot to someone in Afghanistan or Korea or wherever the soldier is stationed, and they had time to mail it back? Like, no, none of this adds up. That's not even the process. So there's several thousand ballots showing up in the middle of the night. Things like
that's
that.
Not normal?
No, right. They, after the polls closed, they know what to stuff. So there were lots of grievances, and I actually saw them illegally casting ballots for Joe Biden. I saw this. So they have something where they call adjudication. So they have the ballot come on the screen, and there's supposed to be one Republican and one Democrat. And what's supposed to happen is if there's an issue with the ballot, they're together supposed to decide how to rectify the situation. And there were ballots where clearly the person had overvoted, and they were giving the votes to Joe Biden. And so when I went to the person overseeing the TCF Center to complain, he wanted to argue me down. And so,
Really?
I saw intimidation, harassment. And then to your point, when those pizza boxes went up, at one point, they actually chained the inside of the door shut.
That's against the fire code, right?
That's what I would think. And I was terrified because here we are as Republicans in a deep blue city. And it didn't help that the GOP at the time had us wear these giant lanyards that scream hall monitor. The 2020 election is one of the greatest travesties in American history. Whether people like Trump or not is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is we, the people, have a right to political representation. The only way that is expressed is through the election process.
That's exactly right. And that's what I try to tell people also. It's not about Trump or Biden. It's about preserving our republic and making sure that the people are actually putting the people they want into office. Right now we have these selected folks that are going into office, and it's absolutely mind blowing that there's half of us see it, but the other half call us crazy for pointing it out.
Well, yeah, I think it's a combination of things. I think there's some willful ignorance going on, and I also believe that the corrupt actors have done a sufficient job with their traitors within the GOP. The people on the left, the Marxists in the Democrat Party, they're Marxists. So and they embraced, murdering children. They embrace sexual depravity, exposing children to pornographic material. So I don't expect anything else but wickedness from these types of people. But what infuriated us here in Michigan at the time of the 2020 election, we had control as Republicans of both the House and the Senate. And we were just imploring our Republican officials to please investigate. Because if the shoe had been on the other foot and you had Republicans win an election, quote unquote, where Democrat activists had witnessed Republicans cheating and they controlled both bodies of the state legislature, right, they would have been all over it. They wouldn't have tolerated it. But yet our Republican-led legislature wanted to kind of pat us on the head like puppies and tell us to settle down. To make matters even worse, the Senate Oversight Committee, they produced a report trying to dismiss our claims, and it matters worse is that our Republican Oversight Committee asked that our Marxist Attorney General consider criminally investigating those who made claims that the 2020 election was stolen. That's a violation of my First Amendment rights. That's a violation of so many laws. But for our Republican legislature to actually tell and suggest that our Democrat Attorney General consider criminally investigating people for saying that they witnessed a crime.
Right.
It's a uniparty. It's a complete uniparty.
I see that here in Texas. A lot of people point out the uniparty, or it sounds cliche, the rhino Republicans. I told you this before. I say that I'm an independent. I'm 100% independent because I'm for the people, and I ran for sheriff because I wanted to fight for the people and not the party. And that's what, I wasn't going to have my people at the sheriff's office answer the phone and say, are you Democrat or Republican? We want to help everybody, right? So whether we agree on Biden or Trump or neither, it doesn't matter. It's what matters is we preserve our constitutional republic, and then we get these bad actors out of these offices that are basically running our country into the ground. I think you did a great job up there pointing that out, especially in a deep blue state. You had to have some opposition all over the place.
Not really in the beginning. They were fine. It was more so, and after the polls closed, and what was very suspicious is these individuals showed up and they had no type of writing utensils or paper or anything. So most of us, we looked like school kids. I had a book bag with extra snacks and a clipboard and extra pens and paper because we were there to actually work. These people, they had some individuals show up in matching outfits who had no type of supplies to be poll challengers. They were simply like enforcers. They were like thugs. They showed up to simply intimidate and harass. Like myself and some other Republican poll challengers, we were standing there supervising the adjudication process, and they're walking by, get back, get back, get back, trying to intimidate people. It was absolute insanity, or just harassing us. For example, this was during COVID, so they forced us to wear masks. Now, we could have protested and said we refused to wear masks, but they would have had the cops throw us out. Right. So nevertheless, we're sitting in our little square, probably 100 feet, maybe not 100, I don't want to over exaggerate, maybe 50 feet from anybody. And we have our mask down to catch a breath because you have a mask on that long, the fibers start to break down and get in your lungs. Put your mask up, Just, real petty stuff that they were doing. Or if we're trying to supervise something happening, they have people they had their other groups like SEIU, NAACP, the ACLU, and all these other groups. They have them kind of circle around us and be their henchmen.
When you're in there pointing out their flaws and the things that they're not supposed to be doing, they're really good at making you feel like this is normal. You're the one that's wrong. You're the one that's not seeing. You don't know. You're not here all the time, so you don't know what you're witnessing. And in fact, it's really not that hard to point out corruption whenever you just start asking people and they start defending it right away immediately. They tell on themselves. I sat in on the 2022 election and pretty much pointed out all kinds of flaws and issues with the system and what they were doing. And they basically just come after you and make you feel like you're inferior to them. And this is our show. We're going to run it the way we want. And you go over there and sit in the corner. You watch. That's all you're here to do is watch. And I'm just like you. I can't just watch and stand by and allow these people to overthrow our government, because that's exactly what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. It's a threat to the republic.
Yeah. So it makes you sick to your stomach, but it's good that it fires up people like yourself, to go out there and continue to do more. Because that without people like us, then they would just steamroll right through us. They would do whatever they want, whenever they want.
You're absolutely right, because the other point, too, is why a lot of people don't see what's going on, because they're in denial. Humans are conflict adverse. They don't want to get in conflict. I don't enjoy arguing with people and fighting with people, but it's just a necessity if I want to preserve this great republic. But I think that in America, the overall majority of our lives are very comfortable in the sense of we don't have to deal with government tyranny.
Right.
So we don't really care. And I'm a sports fanatic. I love sports. That's one of my pastimes. So people are so caught up in their sports or their fashion or their TV shows or entertainment or whatever it is they like to do for recreation that they don't want to go out and get in the mud with these people. They just rather be in denial. And then oftentimes when I talk about like these globalists that we're up against, this globalist cult that's really behind this, they're the real puppet masters in this whole situation. They're the gang that we're facing. And a lot of people just don't want to accept it, because I know myself, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing when talking to friends and family about what we're actually up against. It's like, oh, Kristina, you're crazy. That sounds ridiculous. I'm like, I experienced it.
You got a baby dose of it whenever they basically forced you to wear a mask to have a life outside of your home, and to travel, to go to restaurants, to do all that stuff. And the amount of force in them trying to make you take a shot, the injection, the COVID injection, something just didn't seem right about that to me right at the very beginning, how hard they were trying to force this shot. And I mean, it stirred up something inside of me. I'm going to fight back, and then I started reading on it and started doing some more digging and realized real fast, that shot's not for me. It's not for anybody. It's something that the government's mandating, and it's actually unconstitutional. So for them to close our businesses down, 100% unconstitutional. The county, Brazoria County, was putting out propaganda every single day on their Facebook group. It seemed like every single day about how you needed to socially distance, and the whole. We've heard it for 3 years, whatever. But I feel like people like you and I are truth tellers, or we're truth seekers, and you feel like nobody's listening to you in times like that. Now I think, fast forward 5 years later, I think there's a whole lot more people that are listening to people like you and I, because we stood up against it in the face of adversity, people calling us conspiracy theorists and crazy and et cetera, et cetera. And we fought against that system with very few people on our side. There was it seemed like a handful of people that weren't willing. There was more people that were willing to mask up than there wasn't go around and put this face diaper on just to go have a dinner with your family or go get on a plane to go somewhere. I canceled all travel plans because I'm not playing into tyranny. It's not me. It's not who I am. And I felt like if more people did that at the very beginning and fought back from that first sign of this huge injunction in our lives, then we wouldn't have had to drag it out as long as we did, because the government would have had no choice but to back off of that nonsense.
Yeah, no, and think about I agree with you. To answer your question directly, yes, I think if more people would have stood up in the beginning, it wouldn't have gotten as bad as it did. I think, in the very beginning, I was very confused. I'm like, what is going on here? And so that it was all very confusing to me. And at the very beginning, I didn't know what to think. And then eventually, then I began to realize like there's something nefarious going on. And originally when President Trump said that the COVID virus came from China, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe originally very early on, he mentioned it came from a lab. And it was like, oh, he's crazy. He said he's crazy. And then as I began to hear about, people taking hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and the attempts to demonize those people, it's like, well, wait a second. Now, I will say one of the things that did help me is I personally, it's not that I don't believe in vaccines. I don't trust the vaccines. So that's made me suspicious of the medical industry, because I'm a mom. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had a coworker say to me, and this was some years ago, do not get vaccines. She said, my son was completely normal. He got vaccinated and he became autistic. And this was somebody I worked with, saw every day. And I was kind of like, whoa. And then I talked to some other people, and there were folks who had that experience. Their kid was completely normal, and then they get vaccinated, and now their kid is showing signs of autism. And now being in politics, I met a lot of people like that. And so back at that time, when you would go into a pediatrician's office and say, oh, I don't want to vaccinate my kid, 2 times I was kicked out of pediatrician's offices because I would not vaccinate my daughter. Oh yeah, they weren't nasty. They just said, well, I'm sorry, I can't treat you because there's a philosophical difference, but it's important and we believe that you should vaccinate your child. I'm like, I'll see you later. Not putting that poison in my kid. So then on top of then a second time I called the doctor's office. I explained like, hey, I don't believe in vaccinations. Is that going to be an issue? Oh, no, it's fine. Bring her in. So the doctor is sitting there and going through, and I said, oh, that's okay. I don't believe in vaccinations. Oh, I'm sorry. We can't treat you. So they do this to kind of pressure parents into vaccinating their child and all the disease and all this horrible. Listen, I'm not saying inoculation is not a good idea, but you guys dump a bunch of extra toxins in the vaccines, plus that vaccine manufacturers have immunity against any type of they have no liability. So you're going to force a medical treatment on my child where the creator of this medical treatment has no liability if my child gets sick or injured. And there was a case out of Georgia where this girl, her father was a mitochondrial specialist and was able to prove that the vaccines caused her autism, but then the judge put a gag order on the father so he can never detail more of the case. So I'm supposed, so with that all being said, when the COVID pandemic happened or scamdemic happened, I already had that in the back of my mind where I'm like, okay, you know what? These people have already shown to be very dishonest in the medical community. Oftentimes, not every time, more than not. And I'm sorry to say. So I just kind of was like, something is up, but I wasn't quite sure. And then I think one of the other things that's important to mention is the impact on our young people. Because a lot of young people had a lot of problems coping because as adults, we were still kind of confused, but able to process. Imagine being 12 years old.
Yes.
And you're turning on the TV.
Being removed from school and being away from your friends and everything that you knew in life. Mm-hmm. It's insane. The kids definitely suffered a lot. I don't know what that's going to in future, testing or whatever, what that did to their education process moving forward, how far that set them back. But it's unfortunate what happened to those kids. Listen, real fast, we have to get a word from our sponsors so we can keep this show on the air and talk to more people like you. Can we hold that thought real fast?
Sure thing.
Thank you so much.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Need bold, high-quality ink? Seven Souls Tattoo Studio has you covered. We're obsessively clean and professional, guiding you from idea to unforgettable art. Got old ink? We'll transform it into stunning new work with precision and creativity. Call 979-871-9115 or drop by Seven Souls at 20 Circle Way in Lake Jackson, Texas. Boat season's here. Is your ride ready? At Liquid Rides in Brazoria, we handle certified marine repairs and full engine builds. We're your Mercury Marine and PCM dealer, keeping you smooth all year. Plus, custom stereo installs for boats, vehicles, side-by-sides, and Jeeps. Call 979-798-0123. Liquid Rides, custom audio, certified performance, built in Texas. Need a barn built to last? At Stuckey Barns in Brazoria County, Texas, we blend quality craftsmanship with rugged durability and Texas pride to make your dream barn real. From custom barns to metal buildings, we build strong, local, and backed by hometown service. Call 979-236-7771 today. Stuckey Barns, built strong, built local, built in Texas.
And now, back to the Kevin Henry Podcast.
And we're back with Kristina Karamo with the Karamo Report, right?
Yes, the Karamo Report.
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So we got a little off track with COVID-19, but we should pick that up on another episode.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your run for Secretary of State.
Yeah. So what happened after witnessing the election fraud of 2020, it was so egregious to me. And then the pure frustration I had after the fact. And in Michigan, in our state constitution, Article 2, Section 4H, we have a right to an audit. And we had control of both chambers of the legislature, and we kept in demanding that they give us an audit. We had a constitutional right for one, and they just refused to do it. So again, if we would have had Democrat representatives, I would have expected nothing less. But considering it was our own party, it was very infuriating. So it's obviously some more details. I decided to run for Secretary of State. And and we just took off like a rocket. Our team, we just went all around the state. We got 83 counties, of course, nowhere near as big as Texas, but we have a very large state. And we went around just talking about how to restore our election system. And as we went around, and I connected with some SOS candidates in other states out of Arizona, Nevada, Ohio, California, and we were noticing patterns as well with like Jenna Griswold out of Colorado, Katie Hobbs out of Arizona. They were all part of George Soros' Secretary of State project. So we put together a response as Republicans to kind of prevent them rigging the 24 election and just securing our elections as a whole. Because I think that with the 2020 election, the corruption was so obvious that people lose sight of the fact that they rigged other elections too. It's just that one was obviously more coordinated because it was a national election. Right. So nevertheless, what was really shocking, which led me to eventually running for state chairwoman, it was our own party after I won the nomination, and we won by 66% of the vote. So it was really a strong nomination. Campaign. I was endorsed by President Trump. And what happened is that after we won the nomination, I started getting pressure from the party to calm down. After you win the primary, you got to kind of pull it to the middle. It's like, no, that's dishonesty. Because if I stood before our delegates and made pledges to them on certain positions, I'm going to stick to those. It's about how you articulate them, because election security is a matter of national security, period. And so we were able to effectively communicate why this was a nonpartisan issue. But the problem was that my opponent, she had millions and millions of dollars dumped in her campaign, where our party starved me. And I got so much pressure to stop talking about elections. Like we had John Engler, who was a former governor of Michigan. After the primary election, there was like this little unity event. They had where myself, the governor's candidate, and AG candidate, we all got together. And so I saw former Republican Governor John Engler. He was a 3-term governor of Michigan in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I approached him and I said, hey, Governor Engler, I would love to sit and talk with you about, politics, about statewide campaigns, and just kind of pick your brain a little bit, because I'm always trying to reach across. I am from the constitutionalist wing of the party. I make no bones about it, but I still try to, stick my hand out and work with anybody I can, so long as there's no expectation that I compromise my values. He didn't even look up from his plate. And he's just like, all you need to know is stop talking about elections. Stop talking about elections. It's noise. And the thing about it is the Secretary of State is a chief election officer. Now, that is my most important responsibility. Of course, the things like the branch offices to get people their driver's license and all these other things are important, but what's more important than national survival? And so it became very clear to me, and I got pressure from the co-chair of the state party at the time. I had retweeted on Twitter the video of Joe Biden where he said, we have the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics. Remember that video?
I do.
I shared that video, and the co-chair of the party called me up and goes, Kristina, you shouldn't have done that. The DeVos family is going to be so upset. I'm like, these are the words of Joe Biden. He openly acknowledged that they were rigging the election on camera, and I'm supposed to...
And you shared it. That's all you did.
So because these people, they're like, we got to swing to the middle. We got to swing to the middle. No, that's uniparty talking points. We don't swing to the middle. We speak the truth. Being a constitutionalist isn't a right or left issue. It's an American issue. That is what we unite behind around Americans. So nevertheless, the party was clearly not interested in helping me win. They wouldn't even publicly acknowledge me. Our party wouldn't even acknowledge my existence. Now, I am not a prideful person. I'm not looking for pats on the backs or celebration, but just from a strategic standpoint, if you have a party nominee for the statewide office, it would make sense that the party would help promote the candidate, not pretend the person doesn't exist. But it was clear to them that I won't play ball. And so after the party sabotaged my election for Secretary of State, I was like, we as Republicans are really the party, right? And I try to be very intentional with my language and not say Republicans in general. It was Republican Party leadership, because I'm a Republican. And I know many Republicans who are constitutionalists are concerned citizens. But the Republican Party leadership is corrupt. they're corrupt. And so what happened is that the party had sabotaged my election, and I had been aware of other candidates who also had the party sabotage their election. And I said to myself, never again. We're not going to have this where the state party chair is sabotaging candidates' campaigns. And so we ran a campaign. We had about 9 people running, and we won by about 14 points. And so when we won, took the party, it was knives out from there. And what I experienced was really heartbreaking from the standpoint of not that my feelings got hurt, but it was a lot of people who profess to be Christians who are just unrestrained wickedness, just pure evil. They treat Jesus like a mascot.
I've seen that here. I went to a prayer group. It was a prayer meeting before the general election.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on a Sunday. It was after church service, but it was before dinner. So it was like 2:00. There was a prayer meeting at the Civic Center. And I went in there, and they split us up into groups of 5, I think, 5 or 6, because there was about 25, 30 people in the room. They split us up into groups of 5 or 6 to have our own little prayer group, so there was 4 or 5 prayer groups inside this room. And I held hands with my wife, and then I reached over to hold the next leg because we were gonna pray together at the beginning. And she basically said, "I'm gonna have to excuse myself from this prayer meeting because I can't pray with you." That was one of the quote unquote most Christian ladies in this area, but come to find out, she is like a Jezebel. She jumps from church to church and she starts fires in all these different places that she goes. But she was such a Christian that she couldn't pray with me in this group, right? So none of this stuff makes any sense. I feel like a lot of these people are controlled, and I feel like there's a lot of blackmail going on, and there's a lot of just controlling people through their own devices. I think there's people that have bad habits and bad traits, and I think some people know that where their faults are, and they blackmail them, and they get them to act a certain way whenever they get them in office.
It's funny you say that because we had a guy here in Michigan that he ran for chair, and when I ran too, and he did everything he can to try to sully my reputation, say I was controlled by the CIA, all kind of stuff. Now, I've lived in Michigan my entire life. This guy has lived in California, Oregon, and he just magically shows up in Michigan. And I talked to someone who's from his neck of the woods in Southwest Michigan who said that this guy made me think, when you talk about this woman, that he was a part of a church this individual was affiliated with, and he just like divided the church. And this is what he did. And he talks Jesus and speaks so soft and talks about the Lord. And when you start looking into these people, they have nefarious past. And
Yes.
When you mention about blackmail, I think if we just step back for a second and you look at these various entities, whether it's like the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the Aspen Institute, U.S. Global Leaders, all these various organizations, they have people they recruit, train, and deploy into politics. And I myself, before I began running for Secretary of State, when I was still the spokeswoman for my county party, had someone contact me about an organization they thought I should potentially get involved in. Well, guess who was on the board of that organization? Liz Cheney. So what they do is they find people they think could potentially do something well in politics or business, and they recruit them in. They train them on the talking points. They train them on their way of thinking, and then they go, and the people who fund those organizations go bankroll their campaigns. So some of these people are pawns, but like you mentioned, they intentionally recruit people who are morally compromised. This is why in Congress, you see all these people, you're like, why? What are they doing? It makes no sense. At one point, I used to believe that these people were just simply cowards, or they were scared and they lacked a spine. And then after being involved at the level I was involved in, then it became very clear to me it's not about lacking a spine, it's that these people are degenerate in their personal lives, or they're actually globalists. They're globalists, and that's what we're up against. I think we oftentimes get distracted by the right-left paradigm, and I say that as a Republican, we get too distracted by the right-left paradigm that we don't realize that we actually are up against a bunch of technocrats. I mean, these people, they brag about what they're up to. They brag about what they believe. Their various organizations, they say what they want to do. They want a centralized system.
Yes.
And look at the Patriot.
They're not getting into politics for the right reasons, like yourself and myself. They're getting into it because they want to know what you can do for them. They want to keep up with the Joneses. They want the bigger houses. They want to go to the fancier dinners. They want to go to Vegas with the local business owner that buys their whole trip and pays for private airfare, pays for the meals and the hotel rooms and the gambling, pays for that. They want to be in the in crowd. I guess it's like a high school clique thing or something. I don't know what it is. Like they missed out in high school and they're trying to make it up now. But I don't know what it is, but yeah, they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're not doing it for integrity and doing it for kingdom, right?
What these people, that's what I call unwitting pawns, the people you're referring to, because everyone isn't involved, isn't a globalist, right? Some of these people, they are just low life, unwitting pawns. They're just so desperate to be involved, to be connected, to feel important, to feel special. They want to belong, that they will do anything to get it. They're not necessarily believers in the globalist vision. And then you have others who are. So perfect example, what happened when I was elected my GOP chair, which again, this whole thing is a really long story. From the very beginning, I instantly started getting attacked. She's terrible. She's horrible. And it's like, folks, you've never seen a state party chair be trash or even talked about. Most people have no idea who a state party chair even is.
Right.
The person who was chair before me, Ron Weiser, he's a board member of the Atlantic Council, which is a globalist organization involved with the United Nations. So the former chair were all billionaires, which I'm not a classist, so that's not a negative. But the point I'm making is these people were billionaires and they're globalists. So I'm just an everyday citizen. So it was a stark break from traditionally who is the chair, because that's what our delegates wanted. They wanted an everyday person who doesn't have these either professional or personal ties to these globalist entities. And when I talked to other GOP state chairs who got elected around the same time I did, there's the guy with the GOP chair out of Kansas, him and his wife were being stalked by a former chair. And
Wow.
so this how insane this stuff gets. So it's not just in Michigan. I talked to a county chair out of South Carolina. This woman actually had someone manipulate her vehicle. So these people this is not basic politics, right? It's for the control of our republic. And so after I got elected and started instantly being attacked, and then I realized my co-chair, who professed to be a Christian, was morally compromised. How she was morally compromised, I don't know, so I'm not going to speculate, but she was morally compromised because we have an audio recording of her claiming that thugs used her to oust me. It's like, well, how did thugs use you? What was going on in your personal life that thugs could use you? And then what happened was, as a small group of people got together, and with the help of the RNC, NRCC, they were all involved. The NRCC is the fundraising arm for the Republican Party for Congress. NRCC tried to slander my character. All of these people were involved in a coup against me to replace me with a guy named Pete Hoekstra. Now, for you guys in Texas, their name may not mean much to you, but Pete Hoekstra was in Congress during the Bush era and the Obama era. He was also chair of the House Intel Committee and received an award from the CIA. So that tells you what you need to know about this guy.
That's all we need to know, yes.
Yeah. Exactly. We call him Patriot Act Pete because he was a salesman for the Patriot Act. So we know that the Patriot Act was used against J6ers to throw many of them in prison without due process. So the Patriot Act has been nothing but a ploy to surveil American citizens and engage in constitutional abuses. You think of Mike Rogers, who was propped up to run for Senate in the state of Michigan. He arrogantly said before Congress that your constitutional rights are being violated if you don't know about it.
Yeah, that one kind of hits home for me, is the J6 thing, because I was actually, myself, my mother, my wife, and my son was 11 years old at the time. We went to D.C. on January 5th. And just to kind of brush it up real fast, we went and first of all, I didn't feel comfortable there at all. Nothing felt good about being there. It just felt, from the time we got off the plane to the time we got back on that plane, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. But watching people mock us for walking outside in a park. We were walking in Lincoln Park, and these ladies about 100 yards away screamed at us at the top of their lungs to put our mask on. And, I've never heard anybody tell you to put a mask on while you're outside in a park. That was the first time I heard that. And then being there on the ground, and when we were walking to the Capitol, there were already calls saying that they had already broke in. And there was people running around screaming, "Feds, feds, feds." There was patriots there that already pointed out the fact that there was feds running around and trying to antagonize people and get them to go in the Capitol. And then, they tracked my credit card because I used a Bank of America credit card. They tracked my transactions. And when I got back to Texas, I was I was working at my shop, and my office manager come back in the back of the shop and grabbed me. She goes, "Hey, Kevin, the FBI is here to see you." And I was like, "Shut up," because she'd always joke around with me. And she goes, "No, seriously, the FBI is in your office to come see you." And so I went in there, and he basically asked me a series of questions regarding January 6th. And I wanted to know how he knew I was there, because I didn't call the FBI and tell them that I was at the Capitol on January 6th. So that's another thing, 100% unconstitutional, tracking my credit card payments. I mean, my credit card charges. So, I mean, just watching all this, a series of all this stuff unfold, and that it really made me wake up to, if people like us don't stand up and get involved and start fighting back, our kids, our grandkids, they're not going to have anything except for tyranny. They're going to be constantly masked, constantly vaccinated. And if they don't do it, they're not going to be able to make a paycheck, provide for their family, or travel to go see anybody. So, I mean, people like us have to get involved and go out and start pushing back, because if not, they're just going to steamroll us and do whatever the heck they want. So, I mean, that was another, I felt called to run for sheriff, and just like I'm sure you felt called to run for your GOP position. So it's a thing, it's a calling that I feel like is put on your heart and put on your life, that once it starts burning inside you, you have to follow it. You have to follow your voice, that voice inside, follow the Holy Spirit, and start doing things that He's telling you. And that's the reason why, I mean, after just lengthy prayers, going to see my pastor and getting involved that way, that's why I decided to run for sheriff, because we're not in a good position down here, the way things are being ran in our sheriff's department. Sheriff could have stepped in and stopped all this nonsense immediately. It could have been, there was some good sheriffs out there that stuck up for their people and fought back against the system and didn't allow this nonsense to happen. There was so many more sheriffs that just went with the flow. And it makes you wonder, how compromised are these people?
Well, yeah, if I could, one of the things is we have to step back and make sure we have accurate situational awareness regarding the disposition of our enemy. And I think that is one of the massive disadvantages we have, because when you look back, let's just step back with the 2020 election and what ensued January 6th. What type of entity has the scope and reach to pull that off? We have to think about that, because that was way too well coordinated. Yeah. I mean, instantly, the media talking heads, they had their talking points. The judges were ready to shoot down our lawsuits. Think about that. And then
that was years of planning. That was years of planning.
Yes. So we have to ask ourselves who and what is going on, because it has to be an entity that has the scope and the reach to pull that off.
Yeah.
So and then you look at not just that, but other things that are happening in our nation, just chipping and the chip away at our national sovereignty. And the GOP, with the compromise in GOP is a necessary component where they have to continue to basically utilize these people who have a schizophrenic relationship with the Constitution. Because after with myself, when I got elected chairwoman, our slogan was, "We are the party of the Constitution." And after I got elected as chairwoman, because as state chairs were all members of the RNC, I was committed to, one of my big focuses was protecting the party platform. That was huge. And the party platform at the 24 convention was essentially gutted. But additionally to that, the guy, as I mentioned, I described what he is and what he's about and how he's the ambassador to Canada, who they put in to take my place. I mean, this guy engaged in so much tyrannical actions against other delegates in counties and districts leading up to the conventions that elected our RNC committee man and woman, conventions that elected nominated some of our statewide positions. We were at a convention where I had proper credentials. He called the cops on me. We got it on camera where the cops were hassling me, escorting me out. We have video of his thugs manhandling district chairs. I mean, these people engage in thuggery. So they use intimidation and somewhat semi-violent means to intimidate people. And what's so upsetting that many of the people they're intimidating with are older people, so we got to sit back and ask ourselves what's going on, who is behind this. And when you start asking the who questions, then you start seeing all these various organizations and the kind of shell game they play.
You start to see how deep the rot is, and it's so deep and it's so convoluted that it's hard to understand for normal people that are just now waking up to corrupt politics. People are starting to pay attention more and more by the day, But to go back, I mean, I went on a fast track for 5 years. In 2020, I was dead asleep to how corrupt our politics are. Fast forward that to now, I don't see any good in it. I don't see, I mean, and I see that there's people standing up like yourself and ready to take the gavel and run with it. But I feel like until more people get involved and more people run for office, you have a choice of bad and worse. And it's not good for society that way, because obviously you saw what we did during the COVID pandemic. So how do we keep ourselves from going back to that? How do we move forward? How do the Michigan people do that? How do you guys move forward?
I would think, kind of to your point, I think it starts with our faith in Christ. Ezekiel 9, when Israel was about to face judgment for their rebellion against God, God instructed the man clothed in linen to go and put marks on the heads of people who would be destroyed. And the reality is that judgment started at the house of the Lord, and the people who were spared from judgment were the people who cried out against the wickedness. Now, that's very powerful. If you read Ezekiel 9, the fact that the people who cried out against the wickedness were spared, because the people who not just didn't engage in wickedness, but they didn't do anything to stop it. They faced judgment. I also think of the book of Isaiah with Hezekiah, when he showed the Babylonians all the riches of Israel. And Isaiah chastised him and said, why would you do this? Your children are going to get carried away to captivity. And Hezekiah just rolled over and was like, well, I'm not going to see it in my lifetime. And I think of as Proverbs 24:11-12, I mentioned earlier, where the Bible talks about, if you see people being carried away to death, you got a duty to stop it. And you can't tell God, oh, I didn't know. And it goes on to say, the one who judges your soul knows. Yes. Those are 3 scriptures I could think of off the top of my head, and there are many more where God is very clear. There is an expectation of Christians to resist evil. We have to.
The problem is there's a bunch of jelly spine cowards that will sit back and watch this tyranny happen. And the good thing is courage is contagious. So I'm sure you've sparked a lot of people to want to fill your shoes and run for an office. I'm sure everything that you've done has sparked a new generation of youth to stand up and be a leader and a role model. Do you have people in mind that have already come to you and asked you for guidance in that?
I mean, sometimes I do. I get people that I talk to in other states, in my home state, to how do you fare against these people, because they saw how I was smeared and attacked. And, the judge who ruled against me to declare that, to install a Patriot Act, Pete Hoekstra, he said to me, Ms. Karamo, I know the majority of the committee just supports you, but this is just sharp elbow politics. So it was so infuriating to people, because it was never about me personally. It could have been you. It could have been anybody. The fact of the matter is, people have a right to representation, and people felt like we elected this individual to be our chairperson to represent our interests within the Republican Party. And because these other people had more money, more power, and had the media and the RNC's help, you guys just going to swap out our person and install a guy who's a traitor to the Republic via his support of the Patriot Act? It's like, come on.
They can pretty much get away with whatever they want as long as they put their mind to it and they figure out where the mark is. I mean, they're such a powerful machine that it's almost impossible to take them out. And that's why we have to stand in that gap and get more people behind us and get more people supportive of us.
But I would also add to your point, you're correct about that, but also people have to go in with proper expectations, because what happens is that many Christians will get involved and they have this kind of idealistic view, because I'm getting involved with the Christians. Now I realize that a third of these people are not Christians. They're actually very demonic people, and they pretend to be Christian and just lie. When I say demonic, I mean quite literally, right? Some of these people are very dark.
Like that Jezebel in that prayer group I was telling you about, right?
Yes,
she literally could not pray with me because I was running against her candidate.
Yeah, these people are very, very wicked people. So what happens is that Christians will get involved in thinking, I'm in the party of righteousness, I'm with the party of pro-life, I'm with these people. And then when they get involved, they experience just such wickedness and evil and just horror that they are like, you know what, I quit. And it's like, you can't see this as a social club. This is a mission from God to save our republic. And when people have that accurate situational awareness and proper expectations, I think they're in a better position to stick it out. Because again, if you think you're just socializing with like-minded people,
Well,
you'll
with
be done
that
in
being
6
said,
months.
is that the church has to get involved. The church has to
Uh-huh.
stand flat-footed and say no to tyranny. And the church has to get involved with promoting good, honest people to run for politics. I
Mhm.
mean, that's the separation of church and state is not what these liberals are saying it is, right? The, they want people. The founders always wanted the church to be involved with helping get people involved in politics. And
Mhm.
the problem is that the churches seem to be taking a liberal sidestep and getting away from what the founding fathers meant for this country. And it really baffles me that there's a lot of pastors. There's some great pastors, don't get me wrong,
Of
but
course, yeah.
there's a lot of pastors out there that basically take a back seat and watch this nonsense happen. Like they let these people shut their churches down. There was a lot of pastors that said, "Heck no, we're not shutting down. We're going all in. If you don't like it, you can take me to jail." That's how it needs to be. That's how all the pastors should
Mhm.
have done it.
You
But
know, it's really interesting. To your point, our founders, if people take time to read some of their writings, they were very clear that our republic is for a moral people. It's that's what it's for. Our country is for a moral people, because the more rebellious we are against God, the more the government necessarily grows.
yes,
Alec de Tocqueville, who was a French sociologist who came to visit America in the early 1800s, he wrote that in order to preserve the Western democracies, we have to maintain Christianity,
right.
because it's not to subjugate others who are not Christians. I do not believe in a theocracy. Oftentimes we get falsely accused of wanting a theocracy. I mean, even within Christianity, we can't all agree. We have so many different denominations. So that that would
Well,
be
that's the
tactic.
reason. That's the reason why the founders wrote that in, the separation of church and state, to keep the state out of church.
Correct. You're
100%.
correct. It's to keep the state out of keep the state out of church, not to keep church out of
Not to
state.
keep the church out of state.
It's
Exactly. So,
completely.
and
Yeah.
the liberals like to twist that and use it for their own brainwashing tool. But
Well, you know what? I would add too, and one of the other things that I experienced was a lot of pushback within the party of my Christianity. I was falsely accused of discriminating against Muslim vice chairs. 2 of them actually went to the local newspaper we have and NPR to falsely accuse me of discriminating against them for being Muslim. I had other people who claimed to be Christian, one who was obviously not, because this was an adulterous woman, who accused me of, "Oh, you guys are just pushing your Christianity." Listen, when I ran, I was like, listen, I love Jesus Christ. I am a Christian. I made no bones about it, but I've never been the kind of person who who won't socialize with a friend. I have friends who are not Christian,
yeah,
so that's not, what did Paul tell us? I believe it's in Corinthians. Like, we're judged the church. Who am I to separate myself from the world? If we separate ourselves from non-Christians, how can we spread the gospel to them? So
right.
that right there doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
But in order to befriend or interact in a positive manner with people who are non-Christian, I'm not going to shrink being a believer to make
Right.
you comfortable. But there was a concerted effort by 2 of these vice chairs to go and falsely accuse me of discriminating against them for being Muslim. So even within the Republican Party, there has been a concerted effort to push Christians out. Now, these people will say, "Oh, no, we're Christian." No, you guys are not. Your father is the devil. You guys are
Right.
not followers of Jesus Christ. And they actually work to purge out true believers because we're not morally compromised.
Right.
So it's going on in the Republican Party as well, unfortunately.
100%. Well, let's talk about your podcast. Real quick, what made you get involved with podcasting?
Well, I think that I have an interesting experience because, as I mentioned, my background is I was a college instructor for 8 years, and I have a master's in Christian apologetics. So I was not interested in running for office or being involved in politics at this level. My focus is really helping to articulate the gospel to people. Apologetics, in case people don't know what that is, 1 Peter 3:15. Whenever asked, you got to be able to give a reason for your faith. So our objective is to help people understand the truth and the rationale of the gospel. And it's a tool of evangelism just to help people when others have objections. So that was my focus. But going from that to becoming a major party nominee and becoming chair of a state party in a battleground state during a presidential cycle, that is a massive jump because, as I mentioned before, the chair before me is a board member of the Atlantic Council. So these are the type of people who typically are in these positions. So I had a very unique perspective because I didn't have to do anything shady or egregious to get elected to these positions. I just spoke the truth and our team organized very well and we won. So with that being said, after everything that went down with the party, I just kind of took a step back. I just said, you know what? I am becoming too angry and hostile. And I had to sit and think and I prayed. I'm like, Lord, what do I do? All of this experience I have, I know you didn't have me walk through this for no reason. And I felt one of the best things I could do was help people understand politics a lot better. Because I will say, for those of us who are deeply involved, sometimes we can, I don't want to say arrogant, but I think sometimes we can be a little bit uncharitable to people who aren't involved and don't understand. And like, why don't you get that? Don't you understand what's going on? Well, if you're, taking this stuff from a fire hose like we are, then it's easier to understand than the average person who's not. And then as chairwoman, this was my job. So yes. I got the chance to see it at a different level. So I really, the point of the show, if you guys, with the sunglasses on and me looking at these people, you can clearly see these people have showed to be one thing, but clearly they're not. There's something nefarious. And my job is to help kind of dissolve that complexity between religion, culture, and politics. Because number one, good theology is important. Right. And oftentimes, not to get too far down a rabbit hole, is that oftentimes a lot of Christians don't even spend time in the Bible. They don't even understand the Bible. And so our failure to understand the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, people really shy away from the Old Testament because it's, you walk through Numbers, it can be a bit tedious. But the point is when we have proper theology, it impacts our worldview and how we interact with other people. Also about culture, because I believe culture is a manifestation of our thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes. And if we do not, as Christians, engage the culture, then a godless culture is taking hold. And we see that happen right now. And obviously politics is really to empower people and help provide them that information so they can go off and be ambassadors and soldiers for Christ in the public square. And I just want to provide encouragement and empowerment. So this project is an interview show similar to yours, where I'm talking to people who've been involved, hearing their stories, and they can share their stories with the audience and to really equip people to go and be ambassadors and soldiers for Christ in their public school, in their particular sphere of influence that God has given them. So I just hope to share people's stories to be a positive influence in saving our republic. I love my nation and I want to do everything I can to preserve our republic because I do not want my kids to experience tyranny. Right. I will say in my childhood, I grew up with, kids who were refugees, not all of them, but several, refugees and people from other countries. And when you hear what people in other countries had to deal with or what their parents dealt with, it gives you a deeper appreciation for America. This is the greatest country in human history. There's no country like it. And if we don't preserve and protect the republic, one, the practical question is, where will we go? Right. And then number two, what will happen to our children? And so we have a duty before God to leave our children freedom.
Yes.
And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do everything in my power to leave my daughters freedom, even if it costs me my own life.
Right. Well, kudos to you on that, and congratulations on your new show. And I can't wait to watch the future episodes coming up. What's up with the logo with the glasses?
Yeah. So have you ever seen the movie They Live with Roddy Piper? It's an 80 movie.
I have not.
Oh, you're missing out. So They Live is like a classic film from the 80s. Roddy Piper, the wrestler, was the starring role. So what the movie was about is there was a secret master race of aliens ruling the planet, and people didn't recognize what was going on. And so Roddy Piper's character, when he discovered when you put the sunglasses on, then you could see their true nature. Not only could you see their true nature and their real faces, which were like these ugly basically skeleton faces. You could read the subliminal messages that they were using on advertisements and commercials. And so they were going about.
That's very fitting for politics, right?
So, and it's funny, when I was a teacher, I used to show They Live to my classes. I would show my students They Live. And because I really tried to keep my political perspectives out of the classroom, because I just felt it was not appropriate as a teacher. But there are some things, irrespective if you lean more right, left, center, whatever your political persuasion may be, I think that Americans as a whole can agree that there is something going on behind the curtain that most people are simply unaware of. So the point was, you can see the three characters. One represents religion, obviously the guy in the pastor's robe, and the woman in the middle, culture, and the guy at the podium, a politician. And these people present themselves to be caring, to be beautiful, to love the Lord, but really behind them is something very nefarious and very wicked. And so, my objective is to really help improve people's situational awareness so we can understand the nature of the enemy we're up against, because oftentimes people think it's just about politics and people want to be in charge and want power and greed. It's like, no. These are some extreme nefarious forces, whether it's the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, all these various people. No, these people are extremely nefarious, and the plans they have for us are very terrifying, and we better start seeing what's going on before we become victims. So,
well, I love the logo, and I guess that's the reason why we got involved, because we put those glasses on way early.
Yeah, for sure.
How can people get a hold of you? What's the best place to follow you and like, subscribe, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so Kristina Karamo on X, Instagram, Facebook, the Karamo Report on YouTube and Rumble. So check me out there. You can see my name on the bottom of the screen, Kristina with a K, Karamo with a K. And check me out, like, subscribe. You can check out our website. We're going to have some other projects coming out as well, where our job is to just bring the truth out there and let the audience decide.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope you will come back on with us sometime.
I sure will. Thank you so much, Kevin.
We can talk for hours, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Tune in next week when we have Mary Flynn O'Neill, General Flynn's sister, on the show. We will be discussing how local action drives national impact. See y'all soon. Spring's here, and it's time to get those flower beds and gardens in shape. Rifles Feed and Supply in Brazoria has soil, mulch, and everything you need to make your yard pop, plus the best feed and supplies for your animals. So call Rifles at 979-798-2909. Fentanyl is taking our loved ones' lives every day, but knowledge can save them. Travis's Voice is dedicated to raising awareness, educating communities, and preventing future tragedies. To learn more, go to travis'svoice.org. Looking for real coverage from real people? Whether it's your home, car, or business, go see Landra Olson's team at Farmers Insurance in West Columbia, Texas, where hometown service meets top-rated protection. Call Landra at 979-345-4479 today.